Some in the media are now comparing situations in the past regarding Walt Disney himself, not the company, but the man, and the writers' strike today as being somehow analogous. Are they similar? Are they the same? Was Walt interested in putting down the creatives of his studio? Well, we'll jump into it all and find out, is the media unnecessarily maligning the man behind the mouse? Right now. And folks, we are back. Another great day for explaining entertainment, keeping you ahead of that culture curve. It's what we attempt to do each and every day here on the WDW Pro channel. Today, we're doing that by getting you ahead of the narrative that is beginning to form in some parts of the media as they tangle with how best to present the current writer's strike, as both sides now entrenched in their positions and the stakes growing ever higher every single day. Now, I could think of nobody better to bring onto the show to talk about a writer's strike than a writer himself, and a darn good one, by the way, someone whose content you should be following. So I want to welcome yet again to the channel, Script Doctor. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me here, Pro. Happy to be here.
Happy we all are, and we're going to get into this happy conversation, and hopefully we'll all be a little bit smarter and a little bit better as a result, you, me, and the audience. So that's the goal. Folks, as we do this, if you like content like it, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and you can stick it to the algorithms. When you click it, we're talking about the notification bell. Now, Script, you and I have been talking before the video, getting a feel for how this is going to go, where we want to go with the conversation. But the conversation begins with Polygon, a website that is known for having some interesting hot takes. They tend to be about video games, but apparently not always. And in this case, the article is by Toussaint Egan. I have no idea on this one. Perhaps it's Toussaint, I don't know. But it's Walt Disney cheated his animators out of profits, and their strike changed the world. Now, my viewpoint is that this article is giving this viewpoint that the strikers, those who chose to walk out of the Walt Disney Studios at the time, that they are the heroes of this story and that they are parallel to the strikers of today, and that Walt Disney is on the wrong side of history in this regard. Script, I know you have a different take on this, but let's start the very beginning of this article, and then we'll develop that into a conversation of our own. Here's what it has to say. The Writers Guild of America, also known as the WGA, has been on strike just shy of a month now, with no foreseeable end in sight. And that's a key point. I don't see a solution coming soon. Motivated by a breakdown in negotiations with Hollywood studios over pensions, residual compensation for streaming productions, healthcare, and protections for writers' rooms in the wake of artificial intelligence, which, by the way, folks, I think that's becoming more and more of an issue, and it is truly a major threat to writers. The WGA strike represents a fight, in the words of writer-comedian Adam Conover. Am I pronouncing that right, Script? Adam Conover?
Yes, but I'd put comedian in quotes there.
For the survival of television, for the survival of television and film writing as a sustainable career. The ongoing drama over the future of the American entertainment industry is just the latest in a long line of conflicts between collective labor and monopolized power. Now, Script, that's where I think that they're going actually after the man, Walt Disney, with that kind of language. I don't think that the Disney company and Walt Disney at the time at any point in his life was able to monopolize. He had major competition all the way up. He had to come from nothing, essentially. Had some of his characters taken from him and had to rebuild. So, in some ways, I think that this does take a few cheap shots at Walt himself. So we'll finish the paragraph, and then I want your take on that. It says, given how inevitable those conflicts are, it's worth looking back at how important they've been as well in terms of shaping the current entertainment landscape. This week marks the 82nd anniversary of a game-changing strike at Walt Disney Animation Studios, one that sent shockwaves through Hollywood and reshaped the American animation industry as we know it today. Script, where am I going wrong in my initial assessment of this?
I don't think you're really wrong in the assessment, but I do think that the writer is conflating a couple of aspects that are very important to note. One of which is being that the game-changing aspect of Walt Disney, of this strike, really just allowed for some of the people that didn't want to come back to work for Walt to go to other studios and work on their animation departments. The
Sure.
other part, too, more to your point, is that Walt Disney did have some fierce competition in the Fleischer Company. They patented rotoscoping before Disney could, and they were masters at it. And they definitely gave Disney and his team a run for their money for many years. And I would say that is very counter to the monopolistic approach that this author is trying to attribute to this period.
Now, making this be parallel to today, do you feel that the writers of today are somehow crusading against monopolistic kind of powers, or is this not a great assessment of the modern era?
That is a pretty good question, and not one I could easily answer.
It's at least decent. We'll give it that.
Yeah, I would say that there's definitely some points of contention. I mean, the only thing you could kind of suggest that would be dangerous with regards to the monopolistic nature is the AI, because that's kind of central. That is like a centralized system. Even if there's variations of it from one company to another, it does stem essentially from the same core. And that in itself could be considered a monopoly for whoever controls the master AI that is being used by the world. Essentially controls the world. They have the cornerstone on it. And
I noticed that you take this to artificial intelligence very quickly. You feel, as I do, that artificial intelligence is a tremendous game changer for everything Hollywood, correct?
It is, and it's a lot like computer generated imaging and various different types of post special effects technology, in the fact that like old Hollywood back in the 70s when this was being theorized, in the 80s when it was starting to be put in practice, old Hollywood was saying this is not a good idea. And the reason it was not a good idea was not in the sense that there couldn't be money to be made. It's in the sense that it could be abused, and as a result, some of the life that comes from making cinema and television would be gone. And time has proven, though, that old guard correct, because it is abused. Computer generated imaging, post effects, manipulation of footage, lack of in-camera practical shots, scenes, and composites have been sorely missed from
Yes.
film and television. And there's a lifelessness to it as a result. And that same attitude could happen with regards to AI, which currently at the time of recording this video, it is not able to compete with some of the best writers in the industry, but one day it could be.
It's like going back a couple decades and saying, currently it can't beat the best chess players in the world, but one day it could be. And today, of course, we know that nobody can beat artificial intelligence in chess or other games as well.
Except for poker.
Well, I hadn't thought about that. I've never seen artificial intelligence attempt poker. That's a great point, because you have to read facial cues.
Not only that, certain games that current AI is being programmed with are programmed with very strict rules. Like chess has very strict rules to the point where formulaically, if no one makes a mistake, you always have a stalemate in chess.
Yes.
That's how it works. And it's not a very good strategy game with regards to seeing if someone is good on the battlefield or anything of that nature. Poker is actually the best one, because you play the cards that you are dealt, and you don't necessarily have the best hand out of the entire table in order to win, because it's about guile, wit, intimidation, bluffing, misdirection. There are so many factors in there that currently an AI cannot really compensate for. And that is probably the better
have you been
game.
much of a poker player?
Yes, actually.
As I was hearing you, I could hear a little passion in your voice.
Yeah, I'm not one for gambling, but I do like playing poker with friends, and we just really we literally bet junk food.
What's your favorite variation of poker?
5-card stud and Texas Hold'em.
When I was in South America for a while, they played a type of Texas Hold'em. I think they called it Iron Cross, but it was Texas Hold'em going horizontally and then vertically, and in the middle, of course, was a shared card. So you had 5 going sideways and 5 going up and down, with one in the middle. And then it played just like Texas Hold'em, except you turned the outside cards first, then you turned the inside cards, and in the final round, you turned the middle, and of course that connected them, and then you could only play off of one line. So you had to pick, but you also had to pay attention to the other people at the table, because they might be playing off a different line of the cards, right? Because you were trying to find your best hand. And so I think about that. just how much more complicated that is. And you're right, artificial intelligence, it's very good at many things, but that takes it to a different level, trying to read the table, trying to determine probabilities, but also weighing in the personalities of those at the table and the pattern of personality that they've presented to you so far. Excuse me. And then also trying to present yourself in a particular way, because poker players are also trying to play in a way that disguises when they have a good hand. So they're not always playing to the best of their ability, even if they're trying to dissuade other players from thinking that they know what they're doing sometimes. So that's an excellent point, Script.
Well, that's what I'm here for. So in regards to this type of I mean, essentially with regards to strikes is that it is a game of poker. Each team has their own hand, and it's basically who's going to call or fold.
Yes.
And that's how, that's one way to bring it kind of full circle to this. This article goes over one of the last animation studios in the 1930s, Walt Disney, that had not yet unionized, and it was something being discussed. And because of the chaotic production on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and the demands put on the studio to the entire creative team to work longer with no additional pay, to meet a deadline, and to meet a deadline on a project that was heavily leveraged against the company and the private property of Walt Disney and I believe his brother at the time. So there's a lot at stake and at risk if this did not go well. And according to this article, certain promises were made with regards to the staff that they would be participating in profit sharing if the movie made money.
So let's get into those paragraphs then.
Yeah.
We're actually there right now. We skipped a little bit. So, everybody, if you want to go read this article, of course, it's linked in the description. But it says, while trade papers at the time reported that Disney Studio was going to distribute an estimated 20% of Snow White's earnings among the studio's 800 employees, the actual bonuses those artists received were equal to or less than what they had previously received for the studio's short films. Some Snow White animators, including Art Babbitt, did not receive any bonuses for their work. A former commercial artist who joined Disney in 1932 as an assistant animator, Babbitt was quickly promoted to an animator proper thanks to his prodigious talent for character animation and penchant for delivering quickly on assignments. By 1941, Babbitt was highly regarded as one of the studio's top artists, credited with defining Disney's signature brand of personality-driven animation through his work on the character Goofy and for his work animating the likes of the Wicked Witch in Snow White, Geppetto in Pinocchio, and Mr. Stork in Dumbo. Now, it goes on to talk about how Mr. Babbitt was one of the organizers of the strike, how that created quite a bit of animosity between he and Walt Disney, even to the point of shouting matches. One thing it does not talk about is what you and I were discussing prior to the video. One, it leaves out sort of the difficulty that the studio faced post Snow White. Many people think that, after Snow White, Walt was rolling in cash. They don't realize that there were difficulties ahead due to World War II, as well as some of the subsequent films not performing as well. And then the other side of it is it doesn't talk about what Walt was attempting, because it wasn't this sort of binary, Walt wants to, not pay people and the people working want to be paid. That's a false binary that didn't exist at the time. So, Script, can you tell us what was Walt's vision that was not involving the union, but which also did not fully materialize?
Well, apparently, it's basically he was trying to do a profit sharing program and also be more ambitious with his animation and what he wanted to accomplish with it. And the other part too is he was trying to reconcile this at the same time that other unions already in the entertainment industry were being financed by foreign elements that he was very passionately against. And he did not want to subject his company to such things. So that's why he was rather resistant to unions. But at the same time, he was also trying to be as best as he could sympathetic to his staff and what he needed from them. At the same time, him and his family mortgaged their properties in order to get Snow White done. And they were very fortunate that it was a hit because they were able to pay off, those mortgages and those debts that they incurred over the 2.5 years of production.
Is it fair, Script, to say that it was over if they had not been successful?
It definitely would have been over if it had not been successful at that time. It would most likely would have had Walt and Ron be homeless, or at least clamoring onto whatever property they had remaining in order to make it to the next business quarter to see what would happen for them with Walt Disney Animation Company.
Right. Bet the farm, essentially. So
Yes.
Scripps, let's go back into that, though, because I think this is key, and this is something that people miss. When you're talking about Walt being against the unionization, now I don't know what Walt's thoughts were on business, because he is legendarily opposed to getting into the business side of things. He let his brother do that. I think he only even appeared one time for an earnings call, and did not enjoy it at all. And nobody wanted him back afterwards, because he had no desire for that side of the business. But when it comes to this unionization, it seems to me that his greatest fear was that the unions at the time were at least partly in line with some of the major threats to the West, right? So you had communism on the rise at the time, and elements of communism were being brought in through the unions. And so that's at least a major factor in his calculus as to what to do at the time. That's not really talked about today. But Script, let's bring it back to the present. What do you find to be the connective tissue that one might find looking back at the Disney situation versus today? How are they the same, and how are they different?
Well, the one way that they're the same is that the Writers Guild right now is arguing that there's a certain degree of exploitation with regards to the work being demanded of the writers versus the pay that's being offered. So, for instance, some writers have come out, and we know this to be true, that if you're writing on a streaming series for maybe 6 to 12 episodes, you're only doing the writing part of those episodes, and you are not carried on through to production and post-production as you would a normal series. And if you are asked to do that, you are expected to do that for free. So you're not getting any additional payment. And so I would say it's very anti-capitalistic to actually request an employee of yours to work for free. And that seems to be one of the common issues here, which is that when Disney was trying to make Snow White and meet the deadline, they were asking their artists to, instead of working 9-hour days, 5 days a week, it was something closer to 12-hour days, 6 days a week, with no additional pay. And that's a big problem. And I think any rational person who finds that their skills are valuable and worth the labor with which they negotiated for should be paid for all the hours that they're working, especially if it's an hourly job, or if it's a salary job, there should be some sort of premium with regards to working beyond the agreed terms of whatever contract or whatever position that requires. And that is a good parallel to what's happening today. Some writers are being only hired for the bare minimum of what is required of them, even though the responsibility of the screenwriter, whether it's a feature film or a television show on streaming or network, is to be part of the creative process up till completion, ideally. Only in some instances where a director and a writer are in perfect sync, which does happen a few times, does the writer not really need to be in the editing suite or really need to be overseeing post-production effects or anything of that nature, unless, of course, they are considered a valuable resource or a valuable voice to get their opinion to see the shape of how the final project is done. And even then, those are negotiated on the feature film side case by case. But for television and ostensibly streaming, the writer is king. The writer supersedes the director, because there's various different directors that come onto various different episodes on network television. Disney has tried to incorporate a new formula where there is a director of the entire series for their streaming service, and that is to try and pull back the writer or the showrunner, as it would be, from having to be involved any further on beyond that point. The next parallel is, of course, the promise of residuals, where Disney set out, as this article points, saying 20% of profits will be distributed based on the input of each staffer up to all of their employees. And unfortunately, Disney did not meet those requirements or those conditions of the deal that was presented. And here we have the WGA arguing for something similar, where whatever residual formula is happening for streaming right now, it is not comparable to what is traditionally used across network.
That's an excellent comparison.
And cable. And thus, they think a new formula needs to be devised, or one that better reflects what is going on with streaming. And recently, some picketers on social media have compared their time working for network shows and how much they get in residuals for something that's been on for maybe 2 or 3 years versus what they get on a show that's being played on Netflix. And for the show that's on network, they get residuals in the thousands of dollars. And for shows that's on Netflix, they get residuals in the hundreds of dollars. And even though Netflix in some cases has a much broader subscriber audience compared to most networks based on regions and affiliates, it seems kind of backwards that they would get less for something that's distributed far more broadly and more for something that's distributed far more narrowly.
Well, excellent summation of those two, of the past and the present. Script, I've got two questions for you. And so I want to hear your answers to both of these as we begin to wrap up this conversation today, which I have found fascinating and enlightening. Question number one is, I'm surprised that it has taken this long for us to begin the process of the media maligning Walt Disney himself. And perhaps this article doesn't go quite that far, or maybe it does. I think that's up for interpretation. But Walt clearly held values that are not in alignment with the Hollywood of today, not in alignment with the media intelligentsia of today. And so that's been a shock to me. I think that we will get there where they are going to go after him and decide that he is not a good standard bearer, not worthy of the name on the company. We'll see how that plays out over the next years. So that's question number one is, do you think that that's going to happen over the next years? But my second question to you is very simple, and you can just follow up that first question with this. Do you see the writer's strike ending soon, and how? So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I'll do the best to articulate them. So with the way the current shepherds of the Walt Disney Company right now are not really doing any favors to the Disney name. That is quite obvious. The market has made a clear expression of that to Disney. The irony is that it's the Walt Disney Company. It is his name. To not revere him for the accomplishments of basically building this company up from nothing, which a number of studios were, and just trying to write him away or write him off from the history of the company would be counter to what it stood for. Now, personally, myself, I've never really been a Disney fan. I did not grow up watching Disney movies unless they were shown in school during a substitute teacher day, in which case
Yes.
I didn't realize that they were Disney movies at the time. I didn't start seeing them until I was in college as part of film history studies, in which case I adore some of the earlier animations that Walt Disney did, including Snow White, Cinderella, Pinocchio, Dumbo, Song of the South back in the day, even Mary Poppins and so forth. I thought they were all fantastic films for what they were, but at the same time, one thing that is to note, and I think this has to do with the current state of Disney over the past 10 years, is that even at Disney at his peak, Disney was never an A+ studio in the studio system. They were the little engine that could. Whenever they had a hit, it was a miracle and well celebrated and revered. The whole reason they invested into real estate was to actually make up for the losses that they weren't getting on the theatrical side. No other studio was investing in real estate or theme parks or any type of ambitious ulterior form of income source because they were doing financially well. Disney was not. Disney had to leverage that. They had to buy very cheap swampland in Florida and turn it into the Magic Kingdom.
Right.
So you have to remember that Disney was never a big studio. It only really saw an increased size when it started acquiring other IPs and distributing them.
Late
And
80s, 90s. Yes.
80s and 90s, it had a resurgence. They found a great value in the video cassette market. They even managed to create black diamond clamshells. So if you have those black diamond clamshells, they're very, very valuable. I remember you could find them on eBay for in the thousands of dollars because people wanted them. And then in the early 2000s, when they started acquiring other IPs, they started making a little bit more money on that. But at the same time, they also started losing money. It wasn't until they got a hold of Marvel that Disney became the force it is, or it was during that period, because Marvel had seized on a formula that worked.
Well, and it's got to be
And
said too, Script. Marvel is a is a company that just prior to being acquired by Disney was not in a great place either. Was in significant threat, perhaps. You know,
yes,
I think people don't understand that these companies, once they become juggernauts, that doesn't mean that they were always juggernauts.
correct. Marvel had been struggling on the entertainment side of thing for many years. Avi Arad was part of Marvel Entertainment, which is the film department of Marvel, up until Marvel Studios was set up as its own independent thing with Ike Perlmutter and Kevin Feige, John Favreau, and Source Co. And they were above like a Mercedes dealership. And I remember a little bit at the time because I interned at Paramount during the very early stages of that, and Paramount had a distribution deal with Marvel, and they were they were basically just trying to make a great movie, and it worked, and it got the attention of Disney, and Disney made an offer, and they went with it, and it ended up being very well, and it did elevate Disney to such a high level of prominence that they were able to essentially buy Fox Studios, buy Disney Lucasfilm, and be the dominant influential force of Hollywood for the first time in its entire existence.
Would we say
And
that's about a 12-year run then? Only about 12 years, maybe?
I would say 10 is more probably closer to
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
I would say from 2012 to 2022 would be the best years of Disney-ish, because even though they were not doing so well in between 2020 and 2022, there's definitely enough in the social climate side of things, financially speaking, that they could still say that they're the top. And this year has definitely shown a little bit more, shed a little bit more light on how that wasn't really the case.
Well, that's another topic for another day. It's a
Mhm.
huge video. We should have this conversation for sure, because I would love to hear your take on how it is that Disney finally scrambled their way to the top and then in such short order managed to topple themselves off the top. That's where it appears that we're going. But real quick, let's answer that question that's so important here, Script. Where do you think we're going with the writer's strike? Are we close to a deal? Are we not close? And what do you think has to happen for these two sides to find a middle ground?
Well, currently, I don't believe we're close to a deal. My understanding is that the Alliance for Motion Picture and Television Producers has not made any scheduling to come back to the bargaining table. We do know that the SAG-AFTRA union is prepping to go on strike if a deal is not met, and we also know that the Directors Guild of America union is in negotiations right now. We will find out, I think, Thursday or Friday if they're going to go on strike, because that's when their existing contract ends. And if two unions go on strike, that definitely puts more pressure on the studios to return to the bargaining table and actually start legitimate negotiations, because some
Whose
of
bank
the
accounts are lower, though, Script? Because I've heard from writers, and I'm sure you have so many friends in this industry. I've
Mhm.
heard from writers who say, "Hey, I'm actually starting to run out of money now. Like, the pandemic put me in a bind, and the stimmy checks are out, and I'm not getting paid right now, and that's no fun." So, who do you think's got the better leverage?
Well, the studios have lost significant amount of money, but they definitely do have better leverage because they have other sources. They're getting investor income right now that they're able to play in the stock markets and use for that. But at the same time, that money is also finite as well. For the writers, there are still some that are still getting the residuals, but that's few and far between compared to all of them, and it's difficult to live off of residuals. But I, I, I mean, the previous strike went 4 months almost, and a lot of people hurt as a result of that. And a lot of writers took part-time jobs while they were striking, and not writing jobs, it was just basic sales or whatever that was around that was needing
Sure,
help.
being
They
servers, whatever it
servers
takes to
working at
survive.
trading Trader Joe's, shopping malls, wherever that you could get a part-time job in the interim. That's where they would go while they were still on strike and still scheduling their time at the picket line. Um, it's in the right now. It's definitely going to be suffering a little bit. But if one of the other two unions goes on strike, or heaven forbid, both of them, essentially making three unions go on strike, the studios will have to acquiesce to something, because right now in some of their counter offers to the requests of the WGA, DGA, and even to SAG-AFTRA, that counter offer is something that can be discussed on a routine basis, as opposed to making a commitment to what they should do with regards to AI crediting and residuals for newer models of streaming and distribution, which shows a little bit of a lack of faith in a studio that says, "Oh, we understand your concerns. Let's table that, and we'll discuss it on an annual basis," as opposed to making it part of an actual contract, which
Sure.
bodes terribly not just for the writers but also for the studios, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next year or so with the way big tech and other media platforms could come into existence in the near future. So it's usually better to try and find something that can be used as part of a foundation for whatever comes next. And that's what happened with the VHS and at home distribution model with regards to streaming. That was the first few tiers of it. And now we're trying to refine and develop that again for the digital age, where people are cutting cable but using internet as a means of getting their entertainment.
Well, Script, this has been just a tremendous conversation. I hope that we can continue this at a future point. I would love to get into sort of what the writers are feeling in terms of all of these parts, especially. I think one of the things I'm passionate about knowing is how the writers are going to handle the accelerating change in technology and in the industry. Things are moving more rapidly in terms of uncertainty for the future. And so that is something that I think we should definitely talk about in the future. I know there's some other topics that we've discussed behind the scenes that we should do in the future, and maybe bring Jonas into some of those conversations. But I want to thank you for today. I hope it's been edifying for everybody who's listened in. Script, where can people find you on this great, big, beautiful web out there?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at ScriptDoctorPhD. You can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/ScriptDoctor. And if you're an aspiring writer or a writer that just wants to hone their skills, I do have a Patreon, which is patreon.com/ScriptDoctor. And the lowest tier, if you sign up, it comes with a 7-day free trial, so you can peruse to see if the articles I post and the tips I post are worth your while before making a commitment. And I'm happy to have anyone come out, say hi, support, or just share the stuff that we're all circulating from my channel to yours.
There you go. And the starting point, folks, is go down in the description and click on that link. You want to go check out the Script Doctor. Fantastic material, fantastic stuff. This is just the beginning of your journey, getting to know all of the stuff that he knows. All right, everybody. The conversation between us has come to a wrap. It's over. But the conversation with all of you begins now. Please drop a comment down below. We covet your comments. We care about what you think. If you enjoyed this conversation, click the like button, share, subscribe, and you stick it to the algorithms. When you click it, it's the notification bell. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
Make sure to catch the Pro Show Thursdays 5 to 7 Eastern Time. Entertainment Explained, The Culture Curve Conquered, live with Pro and all his friends.